Hi guys, my name is Kenzie and welcome to another session of painting with watercolor. And I am super excited about today's piece because it is July. It makes you want to go out on the beach, and I live in Canada, so there is no beaches close to me. So of course I had to paint one. This reminds me a lot of Florida, the Florida Keys area. So I just went with it. And I wanted to go with a very muted pastel vibe. And yeah, I hope you guys like it and enjoy painting this. Okay, so for my supplies, you're going to see here I have my masking fluid. I have 3 different sizes of paintbrushes. I also have my 2 water cups. And I have my water tray that I'm going to be mixing my colors with. I have masking tape that I'm going to be taping around the edges of my piece. I have my cloth to tap my brush with. So let's get started. So you'll see here that I am just taping the top of my painting. I feel like I like the borders around it. I also enjoy that I can move my little cardboard sheet around when I'm not completely finished my piece and I need to use my desk. So here I'm just filling in my masking fluid, and I'm going to be completely filling in the seats, the bird, the fence, and the bag. And this kind of acts as a border that I can just paint over when it's dry, and then I peel it off, and then I can obviously add my details to those things that I've covered with masking fluid. This is a great tool that I highly recommend everybody to have handy. It kind of just transforms your piece because you can really get detailed artwork done and not have to worry about getting in between the little cracks and all the things. So this really speeds up your time of painting. So one thing to keep in mind is this masking fluid gets really tacky, so you have to move quickly, otherwise it's going to ruin your brush. And also make sure to completely clean your brush when you're done, because again, it's going to ruin it. So moving on to the sky, I have some clear water here that I am just applying all over the top, just and I'm stopping at the horizon line right here. And the reason why I do that is because watercolor paper dries really quickly, and this way I'm able to move as I go without worrying about streaks or it drying really fast. So I have a wash here of blue that I'm going to be applying on my sky, and I actually want to use the paper as my clouds. So I'm going to be leaving white space, we call it, which is again just like the paper, and I'm going to be making cloud shapes just with my brush. So I just used the napkin there to kind of make the clouds blend a little bit more. And once I feel like I'm happy with my cloud shapes, you'll see that my sheet is still wet. You can see the shine and glare right there. I'm going in with a darker blue, and I'm going to be shadowing underneath the clouds just to give those clouds a little extra pop, and I feel like it just makes the sky look a lot better. And because it is wet, it's going to kind of expand the dark into the light blue color and even into the clouds, and it's going to be a very soft, fluffy looking sky. Okay, so my sky is dry now, and because I have my masking fluid on, I'm actually able to paint over this and not worry about getting my sand colors or my beach colors on top of my masking fluid. So I am going to apply my indigo first because I kind of want my horizon to be darker than the rest of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply my darker blue right up top at the horizon. Again, I can paint over my masking fluid. It acts as a shield. And this is a little too blue for me, so I added a little bit of black. And I'm just going exactly where my ink line is, and I'm just going to paint over top. And this is kind of like a rotation between leaving some white space and also blending out colors and adding different types of shades and stuff. So you'll see here I haven't even added any extra paint on my brush. I'm just going to be lifting now, dragging colors across just to create a natural highlight in my ocean, going back and forth, left to right, a little bit more blue in that color, bringing it in. This is the fun creative part. Mixing in different blues, water. And as you get closer to where you want your sand to be, that's when you are going to want to start to kind of leave a little bit more white space to kind of act as your, your crashing waves as such. So you'll also see as well, I'm using a very light wash of blue the closer I'm also getting to the sand. And I'm probably going to start to transition to my sand around here, so just below the arms. I'm going to add a bit of indigo as well. I swear it's like my favorite shade of blue. And I'm going to go again left to right while it's still kind of wet, so it has a chance to kind of blend out nicely. It's a little too dark, so I'm just tapping it with water in my napkin. Again, that's too dark. Dipped it in my water, and where I just touched, I'm just going to use the paint that I already have down. Just dragging that around. Whenever I feel like it gets too dark, I'm dipping my brush in my water, tapping my napkin to absorb any excess water, and just slowly kind of going in, touching different parts. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I can actually go in I can add a little bit more depth to it when it's dry, but I'm happy with this. Otherwise, it's all just gonna keep blending and bleeding. So it looks a little flat to me, so I'm gonna mix a little bit more indigo into my colors. And I'm gonna go in now with a second layer. And the key of layering here is to make sure you're still leaving the original first layer blue showing through. You're not completely covering it. And whenever I see a really harsh line that I don't like, you'll see here that I start to dip it in my water. I'll tap my napkin and I'll just use the water to blend out wherever I see a harsh line that I don't like. I'm gonna make it a little bit more darker. Again, tapping my napkin and using just my water here to kind of blend out any of those harsh lines that I see here. Here, there's a bit of a harsh line. And I think that's the key with watercolor. It's just figuring out when to switch from just paint to water, and figuring out how to blend. Like once you figure out how to blend, you'll find that your pieces really come together really well. But it kind of can be a bit tricky figuring out how to blend. And for me, the best way to blend is, as you can't notice, I like to just dip my brush to my water and I'll use my napkin to blend. And just using the water on my brush. Okay, I feel pretty happy about that for right now. I might come back to it or I might leave it depending on how the rest of my piece goes. So I am going to dry this part and move on to the sand. With my sand color, I am going to mix some of my brown in here. So that's a little bit too brown for me. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of the ocean color that I used, just to kind of bring it in to that color as well. Kind of dulls it down a bit, and I actually kind of like this, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to use a lot of water on my brush. I'm going to tap my napkin right here so it's just a wash, and I'm going to start a little ways away from where I stopped the blue because I kind of want it to give the effect of a crashing ocean. I don't want to get too close. And then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to completely cover the rest of the area right here with the wash. And while it's wet, then I can go in and add some soft blends. So this is one of the reasons why I really love working with masking fluid, because I'm able to just cover a lot of surface and not worrying about stopping and trying to individually go over. That's kind of a pain. So if you don't have masking fluid, I definitely recommend trying to play with it because it's actually a lot of fun. And it helps with time as well. Okay, so I'm going to go through different parts now and just kind of move my brush around. This part does not have to be perfect. You'll see I'm just kind of blobbing my brush around different spots. I'm going to add a little bit of green to this as well. Different spots. I'm going to blend that up because I think that's just too much. I'm going to pull this color. Add a little bit of black. A little bit of this to it too. And I'm going to shadow a lot. Just using the very tips of my brush, just underneath the chair as well. There should be a shadow under that. Maybe a little bit under here. bring in a little bit of indigo to kind of mix in with this color to kind of create a shadow underneath this wall. See here, down here is already dry, and I can tell because when I just applied this the indigo color, it just instantly dried right away. So I'm going to apply a little bit more water down the bottom so I can have some softer blends. Just touching different points. And going in towards the ocean just a hair. And I want there to be some highlight, so I am going to just lift with just a dry brush different points around the shadow. I kind of feel like it will just make it stand out a little bit more. The sides. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that for now. I'm gonna blend this, I'm gonna dry this. Okay, so I'm gonna work on the greenery now. So when I'm actually finished with this piece, I'm gonna be cutting it right here, right where my fences are. So you're gonna see here, I'm not gonna be worried too much about over here with the fence. All right, so I'm gonna be mixing my colors. So I'm using the sap green, and I'm gonna mix a lot of it. I'm gonna move this real quick so I don't splatter. So I'm using my sap green. I'm gonna add a little bit of hooker's green to it. Indigo because it's my favorite. See how I feel about this. I like this. I'm gonna actually move over here, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of brown to it. It's a nice color. I'm gonna move this over here. You'll see I just kind of pull and drag the colors that I like over. They kind of make its own color. Adding some yellow to this now. And then I want there to be one more really dark green. I'm going to start with my indigo, pulling over here. And then I'm going to use my sap green. This now looks a little bit too, just a little bit too vibrant and bright. So I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium red. And I'm going to mix it in. Red with green just makes it turn into a really pretty army color. I love, that's my favorite mix of green when I mix it with red. Okay, so I feel pretty happy about this. So I'm going to go in and just create some really nice light lines using the very tip of my brush. Ever so slightly going in. And notice how I'm going down and then lifting up. Okay, so on my scratch piece of paper, you're going to see that I'm starting down and then flicking up. On my page, if you start down and flick this way, I don't know, like that, you're going to see that you have your stump up top. So always make sure you're going down and at top. And do some over here. And they all don't have to be going the same direction. They're kind of like ragweed a bit. So they just kind of go everywhere. Just making sure you're using the lightest pressure possible. If you don't feel confident with this part, practice on a scratch piece of paper your techniques. So going thick and then light. Strokes going back and forth. Practice. And if you're starting off like this, move your brush up more like this, and then practice your strokes even with the tip of your brush, and you'll find even this, you'll get really light strokes. So just practice on a scratch piece of paper if you're finding that you're just going a little too thick. So with watercolor as well, you always want to start off with your lightest colors first, and then you can work your way up. I'm going to move my hand up as well. Get some nice streaks. Around in here now. We're going to go in behind my chair a bit as well. Add a little bit of streaks with my chair, just underneath it and stuff. Just a little bit. I can mix around my colors that I have in my palette. And then some of them, you can start to just use like the very tip of your brush to kind of create a look that there's the very tip of your brush to create. Kind of looks like wheat to me almost. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush, leaving some white space as well. Like this is now kind of awkwardly floating. So I'm gonna, when this is dry, I'm gonna go in and add a little bit more greenery around here. And you'll see I have some ink marks up here. That's to kind of give you an idea of where to put these other ones. So I'm using a very light wash of that brown that I was just using. And I'm doing the same technique, just leaving some white space. So you'll see, especially where the ocean is, the brown, the ocean color is kind of shining through this light part. I'm not too worried about that because I can go in with some darker colors to kind of break that up a bit. I just kind of want to get my colors down and my leaf shapes down first, and then I can kind of worry about that. Just kind of going around random spots at the bottom, kind of just filling it with some of these. Honestly, it just reminds me of ragweeds. I know that's probably not what it is, but that's what it's reminding me of. Going around, filling off. I don't want to completely cover the bottom. I'm keeping in mind trying to just make the bottom just kind of look as natural as possible, and you can do that by using just the very tips of your brush, or sorry, yeah, your brush. So around the fence area, I want it to be a little bit darker, mostly because I kind of want to cover a lot of the ocean. So now I'm going to kind of work on definitely layering. I'm going to go towards the base of the fence. It's very dark, so I'm going to blend this out. But I definitely want to start where my fence is. Using just water to kind of tap away any unnecessary harsh lines. And here we go. Let's start layering in between the fence. When you see that you're just kind of starting to drag around just color and you're not seeing much of an effect happening, it just means you gotta let it dry. It means that it's too wet. Because the only way that you're able to kind of layer and get a lot of depth is with the wet on dry technique. Greenery here, so I'm just kind of going to start going in and just shadowing. And I use some indigo in here. It was definitely my favorite shadowing color. I think I said that with the ocean, but I just love it. It's very natural. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more cadmium red to my mix. So this was my indigo sap green, and I'm just going to add a lot more cadmium red versus the indigo, because I definitely want there to be a contrast between the ocean and my greenery. So I'm going to dry this. So now around my fence, I can start layering and adding shadows for sure, making it stand out more. Same over here. And I just added a bit of black as well between my my fence. Even just bring this up a little bit. So because this is a very big contrast between these colors now that I just put down, I'm going to have to go in and blend it out a little bit, which is fine because I felt like it was just blending in a little bit too much with the ocean anyway. So I'm really happy to go in and make it a little bit darker. This will. Again, I'm not so worried about like this part because I am going to cut it. Okay, so I need to decide what I'm going to do underneath if I want to add any more layers because I'm about to take the masking fluid off. And I do think I really should add a little bit more shadowing and depth underneath my chair during the wet on wet technique. So I just added a little bit of indigo to a sap green color, and I'm going to blend this out now, just using water on my brush. Whenever I see that I'm pulling and just moving around color, I tap my napkin to get rid of it. In here, I'm pulling my color now, tapping my napkin to get rid of it, and rubbing to get rid of any harsh lines if it's starting to dry. This one's definitely going to be drier. I'm going to need to rub it a little bit more. And I'm going to add just the same shadowing color to different spots here just to kind of make it look a bit cohesive with the shadowing. And around and under the bag, I can add a little bit. Okay, so now that I've decided that I'm pretty good with how my background looks, I'm obviously going to add a little bit more depth to this. I'm just feeling like I need to move on to a different point. I'm going to leave the fence because I'm going to keep working on these, but I definitely want to just move on to a different part and come back to this later. I'm also very happy with my beach. And I also now at this point, before I take off my masking fluid, I need to decide, do I want to add any more detail to my ocean before I move on? Otherwise, it's going to be really hard for you to get in between the lines. So since I already have my masking fluid on, I really do like my ocean, how it's coming together, but I'm just going to add a little bit more detail to it just in case and see how I feel about it. So I'm just using a very light wash of my blue, going over different parts. I'm trying to not go over my white space. And I'm glad that I just added this other layer. I think it's kind of pulling it, making it kind of come together that much more. Making sure that I'm just hitting little points. I'm not, and just using like a wash. I'm not using a drastic color here. Trying to hit it right out of the horizon. And I'm going to look at the bottom here. Maybe even pull it a little bit onto the sand. I don't like this part right here. I feel like there's just not much to it, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit more indigo and just try to break it up a bit. Add a little bit more indigo towards the horizon right here. Being careful not to go into the sky. Adding more indigo. The horizon. Do you see how I'm just going right to left here? I'm staying very consistent with how I'm applying my ocean colors. Okay, I feel really happy about that. So I'm going to leave it. So the trick with masking fluid is when you go to remove it, it is so important that it is 100% dry. If your masking fluid is still wet, it's going to either rip your page or it's just going to become really muggy. So there's really two ways that you can erase your masking fluid. And by erase, I mean get rid of your masking fluid. And that's with an eraser, or you can just use the very tips of your fingertips. But I want to make sure my ocean is dry, so I'm going to use my dryer and then come and take this off. Okay, so you see here I have a little bit of blue coming in. So there's a couple things that you can do. One of which is you can get just water on your brush. Whenever you start to pull up the color, you can just tap it on a napkin. Now you have to be careful when you try to just scrub an area. For my chairs, I'm going to be pulling from this palette. It's called Vintage Pastels. And I like that they're already pre-mixed to be pastels. It's like a creamy color to it. So my first chair, I'm going to do yellow, and I'm just going to cover the whole chair yellow, and then I'll go in and do more details to it with a darker shade. But I just want to first get this color down. I really like this palette. I like that they're kind of muted. I think they did a good job with it. Yeah, and creamy. Creamy is the word that I use to describe it. I don't know why. It just feels so creamy and very nice. And it wasn't that expensive too. I think I got this probably 2-3 years ago. I think it was like 30 bucks or something for it on Amazon. So you'll see I'm moving pretty quickly. I'm just trying to get the first layer down. I'm also trying to be careful to not go over into the ocean because it's kind of tricky to fix that if you do. So now that some of these pieces are starting to dry, I'm not going to go over top, and I'm going to stop where the lines are. So that way they kind of stand out a little bit more. So even right here at the bottom, I'm not going to be overlapping. When I go in between here, I'm going to use a lot more pigment because it's supposed to be shadowed, right? So I'm going with like a very muted vibe. You don't have to at all. Like you can make these bright and vibrant. Like this is the creative part. You don't have to have your piece look exactly like mine. Again, I'm not going over these lines because I kind of want it to stand out a little bit more. And if I go over it, it all just kind of blends. And if you use masking fluid, this is the part of the painting where you'll see if you did a good job or if you need to work on your masking fluid skills. There are definitely some spots that I'm like, I should have taken more time and care. But everything can be fixed with some shadows. Whenever you find that you have just too much water on your brush, you can just tap it on a napkin that's next to you as well. Like you'll see even right here when I'm touching, the back of the chair is already becoming darker because of that layer has already dried. Okay, now for the last. I have 3 young kids at home. They're 6 and under. And it's hard for me to complete a painting all in one sitting because I never know when one kid's gonna, run down. Not even like complete a painting, but complete a painting that I'm like recording. Because I don't want my kids to be in the background of the videos. I'm sure you guys don't want to hear my kids either. So you'll see I have my nails painted now, which I didn't have a couple days ago. I haven't painted in a couple of days. So now my nails are changed. And now my son is actually home from school for the summer. It's going to be that much harder to paint undisturbed. Yes, that's just life. When I go in and add more details to it, I'm definitely going to want to clean up some of the lines that are here. They don't look as sharp as what I want them to be, but I feel like just with more layers and whatnot, I'm going to be able to kind of hide and fix that. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of my fence now. I'm getting rid of the mask. Getting rid of the fence. I'm going to get rid of the masking fluid. There we go. And I'm just using my fingers to do circular motions to get rid of the masking fluid. Going on to the fence. So the fence is supposed to be white, but we're going to have to shadow it with some other colors. And I don't want to go too dark. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of gray right here, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of blue. Again, you can use the palette that you have. If you have this palette, you can just mix up some gray or blue. Okay, I want it to just have a little bit of a gray blue tone to it. And I'm going to just go and just shadow different parts of it, leaving some white space as well because we want it to be white. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush to go in and shadow different points of it. And this is supposed to look like a little rickety fence. So you'll see right here, I have a fence kind of overlapping. So make sure to shadow where it's supposed to be kind of sitting on this fence right here. I'm probably going to do a second layer here. I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to slowly build my layer with my fence. I don't want to just go in too dark. paint our little bird. It's a different color blue for my bird. I'll just make it stand out a little bit. And I'm just going to do the very top of my bird like this with this color, and then birds down here around the bottom just a bit. And I'm just going to use water just to kind of blend it out just a bit. Mix up some orange in my palette. I want its tummy to be orange. Okay, we'll come back to the bird as well. And then for the bag, to just stand out too much. So I don't want to go too bright. I have to stay with the I want the bag to appear like it's kind of wrinkled. I'm the easiest person to shop for gifts, especially with my family, because I'm like, just get me watercolors. Just get me watercolors. My husband, for one of my birthdays, he got me Daniel Smith paints. So good. I love Daniel Smith. They're very bright and vibrant and pigmented, and I think they're great. I no longer have them. I need to go buy more. I used up all my tubes that I had. Okay, so right here I actually just mixed in a little bit of gray with that purple because it's supposed to represent the inside of the bag, so I just don't want it to be too close to the front. We want it to have a little bit of a contrast. And the same with the handle. So that's why you'll see here I'm not painting over the handle first, because I want it to stand out and get. And then I'm going to go in with this gray as well and just touch different parts of the stripe. Maybe around the edges a little bit like this to appear that it's curved. And this will just give it a little bit of depth. Don't worry about the white. We'll come in and we'll shadow the white because you don't want this to be flat and then the purple have lots of texture and contrast to it. So we'll definitely come back to the white. And then the same with the handle. So the back handle, I'm going to have it be darker than the front handle. So you'll see I went in right here. I stopped up top and then I continued the back part of the handle, that darker color. Just like that. That will make it stand out a little bit more. And around the bottom, a little bit of curve. Okay, I'm going to go in with gray, like we just talked about, shadowing a little bit. The white, I'm just going to touch different points of it. And then I'm going to use just the purple, kind of a wash of the purple. kind of hanging out. So I'm grabbing that shadow color that I used for the sand. Even just like underneath my chairs, I feel like they're needing more shadow. Here, this looks like it's supposed to be ocean, so I'm going to go in really quickly and very carefully go in and just fill in. I'm leaving some white space as well because I want it to kind of represent the crashing, and I did it ever so slightly so that way it just kind of flows in with the rest of, you know, this part of the ocean as well. That's not very dark. Okay, I'm gonna go in with some green and shadow around the base of the grass as well. Ooh, that looks pretty. I like that. Yes, that is a perfect shade. Woo! I love when that happens. I actually like this color so much. I'm gonna go in and add it at the bottom. Yes, this is definitely pulling it together now. I'm gonna add it to different points of this just to make it stand out a little bit more. This is the detail part now where we're going in with second layers, maybe some third layers, and it's just going to make your painting pop. And this can be the hardest part with watercolor is you'll get to a point and you're like, okay, this looks pretty. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to ruin it. And then you'll stop. But it's pushing yourself, add more details to make it a little bit more realistic and more of that realism. I mean, this is also very abstract. This is not 100% realism because I'm not going into all the details, but it's close. But I find that the more details that you have, the less flat your painting's going to be. And it can be tricky. I went through that stage as well where I would look at this and be like, oh my gosh, this looks perfect. I'm going to leave it. The more experience that I've had with watercolor, I'm able to kind of see like, no, you got to push yourself even if, you know, you don't love it. And then you keep layering on top. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be thankful that you did add the extra layers in as well. Like I could have left this part and been like, okay, that looks great, but I think it looks so much better now with some shadows, some darker greens. And I'm going on with the very tip of my brush now, trying to just have the lightest brush strokes. So cute. Okay, I'm going in now with my yellow, and I just tapped it in some gray. And I'm gonna now go in and kind of shadow just a little bit, just to give some of these parts a little bit more depth to it. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat what I just did for my yellow chair for both of these chairs now. Just going in and shadowing different parts of it. So I've shadowed a little bit above and below this line just to kind of make it stand out a little bit more. Let's do underneath the chair legs. Rub that in. Underneath this part needs to be shadowed. And then of course the actual base of the chair right here where you sit. Shadowing in the lines for sure. this is why it's so important to go light, because if you don't, you're going to have a really hard time seeing the ink marks, and you can always build up. Now I'm just going in and covering up any type of ink marks that I still see with like a darker color and the very tip of my brush. And I'm going to blend out now some of these harsh lines that I see with just water, tapping my napkin when I see that I'm picking up the color, because I don't want to be dragging it around making the whole area dark. And I'm just touching the very edge of the line, just trying to blend it out with water. Just because I am doing this layer, it's just making it kind of come more to life, making it stand out just that much more versus just kind of leaving it with your first layer. And I get it, doing more layers and shadowing can be kind of intimidating. It's not something that I like to do at the beginning as well. Let's repeat for the pink.
Chairs look different. They're not all the same. Okay, so these two look pretty similar. One's on the outside. Spongy, how with a very tip of my brush. I'm going now in shadow the lines where the sticks are.
So there is one line that's really bothering me that I want to blend out, and it's this one right here. So using just water at the tip of my brush, I'm going to blend this out. And right here was bothering me as well. Napkin when I pick up the blue. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. And then just sharpen some of the lines right here. Layers right here.